it sat there for a long time, but he was reading it while it was sitting in my inbox because it was something we were going to read and talk about. And you kept wanting to talk about it. Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? I'm like, hey, no, I haven't read it yet.
This is destroying me.
And finally, like, you were staying up through the night to read this.
Yeah. Well,
it was that important to you, but it wasn't that important to me.
I read it in one sitting, and then I reread it. And then I read a bunch of other gospel topics. Me? Yeah, and then I read it a week later with you.
Well, we listened to it because I'm more of a visual person, so it was easier for me to listen to. Audio-visual, yeah. So, but it wasn't until conference came around.
She was surprised at the things that she was hearing. And then we're sitting down at conference.
Well, yeah. Well, no, we hadn't really talked much about it before this because I was still kind of like, yeah, I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it. I'll read it. Yeah, I'll read it.
Had we not read it until that point?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, boy.
Because conference weekend rolled around and Bryce was very distant from what was happening. Most distant I've ever seen you during conference. And it was stressing me out. And I knew you had questions, but I didn't know how deep they were at this point. And I was like, what is happening? And then the sustainings come, and Bryce is kind of like...
The second session of conference.
Unsure how he's feeling.
Where the prophet and the apostles all get sustained is.
Yeah, and he's very conflicted at this point, and I can see it. And I'm like, what is happening?
When
like, you have questions, and you're just not going to sustain the prophet because you have a question? Like, I did not understand. I was so naive, and...
I got up, and I walked away in our open kitchen area, and I was, like, trying to find something... And they were sustaining the prophet. And Kelsey's like, Bryce, they're sustaining the prophet. I'm like, oh, what? And I was just, I was
totally acting like he didn't know what was happening.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable sustaining the prophet.
At that point, yeah, you were, but I had no idea how deep it was. So after that, I was like, okay, let's read the CES Letter.
Okay, fine.
I was like, what is going through your head? Like, and you're like, no, I cannot sit here and tell you this. We need to read it together. And the CES Letter is, I thought it was anti-Mormon stuff because it felt weird to read it. And I was very uncomfortable reading it.
So at what point were you like, this isn't like anti-Mormon literature stuff. These are actually legitimate questions?
I think pretty instantly. Mainly because of the layout of it. We read through it, and that was very overwhelming. But you were expressing the parts that really bothered you. And I think we might have been close to finishing the CS Letter or shortly, or like before we finished it. I was like, I want proof. Like... Explain to me why this is legitimate and I should believe it, because they have links and stuff, but we didn't click on them really.
Yeah.
So then we went through it again, and we would read the little paragraph or whatever, and you would pull up the source. And I'm like, this is coming from the church website, or this is coming from a journal entry, or whatever it was.
Joseph Smith Papers, yeah.
That to me was a little bit more of a validation of like, this is legitimate information that we didn't know. Yeah. And that kind of, it started to bother me at that point.
And when the truthfulness of the gospel was really important to me, and so these questions are like huge, and I'm explaining through them. And to Kelsey, we talked about this after, but the utility of the church, like the usefulness of like raising a family inside the church, and all those things are really important for her.
Yeah. Which in my truth journey, that you call it, that became a very conflicting point for me. Because we're reading the CS Letter and I'm realizing the truthfulness of it is lacking. Like the information
of the church
is lacking. And I'm like, wow, okay, I've never really... I honestly never really questioned that. To me, it was true, And so, And like I said before, I think I kind of just grasped onto like the things that felt true to me, and things that felt kind of bizarre or something. I made sense of it myself in my own terms. And I actually think there might be a lot of people in the church who do this. And that's what makes them stay, is they've made their own sense of what's happening.
Yeah, I think so.
But people who view it more black and white, it's more harder to stay in when you hear something that might unvalidate the things that you thought were true.
Yeah, like we talked about, it talks about the temple and the different, masonry and the temple and the issues there. And I'm seeing the temple as the, knowing the signs and tokens to get through the veil after you die to go into the presence of God. That's the way I'm seeing it, like Orthodox-like. And this whole time, not knowing, Kelsey's had a different view on it before.
Well, and people would say that. People's like, oh, so when you die, like, this is going to be how it is. You're going to approach a veil and you're going to have to do all this to get in it. I didn't believe that. Or I think I understood it that way, but I was like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know that that's how it's going to be? I'm like, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But right now, I feel good here. And it wasn't so much about, like, the nitpicky things of, like, I honestly would get annoyed sometimes in seminary by the people who would ask the specific questions. They would want to know every detail of how it worked. And I'm like, who cares? Is that really what's important here? Like, I honestly felt that way. It is. And I understand that's important to some people, but, like, it just didn't feel that important to me. So here I am actually thinking logically about the church, which is new for me. And learning all this information, I didn't know where to put. So it was very deer in the headlight kind of experience there for a little while. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we would listen to the CES Letter. We didn't listen to it all night long because I would get overwhelmed.
We had to do it in batches, and I had to kind of convince her, like, hey, do you still want to go through this? You're like, yeah. But I just did a whole day with kids, and I'm like, okay, I get it. And so
we'll just do a little bit. But then we would end up listening to it for like 2 or 3 hours. And
yeah, it was deep, deep stuff.
But again, that was hard for me.
Yeah.
But like the hardest part was like we're listening to it and he'd look at me and be like, see? Ooh. Like, did you just hear what it says? I was like, no. Like it was just kind of going over my head. But I really wanted to understand where you were coming from.
Yeah.
I really wanted to understand the issues that you had. And it wasn't necessarily like to bring you back and convince you that the church was true. It was more of like, this is my husband and I want to understand you.
Yeah.
That was more of my feeling of doing this. And, yeah. So at that point, I became learning more truths about the church. I became more angry that this isn't open dialogue or I wasn't told all these things. All of a sudden, the truth meant a great deal to me. And we kind of went through like this period of time where we were just like angry. We would, be silly. We started drinking Creo Brew, which is not coffee or anything similar.
It's the chocolate cacao beans, dark chocolate. They brew it, or they crush the bean in a way that it's like coffee grounds.
So it's
similar.
Prepared a lot like coffee.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more bitter like coffee, but it's chocolate.
Yeah, so we would drink that.
We were like rebelling because we had to buy a French press to make it. And we actually went to the store and bought some normal underwear.
We did. Yeah. And
because we were like, well, let's just like go with this feeling that we're having, And it was just in the evenings we would change. and just kind of like experience, because we wanted to know how we felt. We're like, what is happening? Let's go. I feel like it was more of like, let's live in the moment kind of thing. Would you say it's true?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we were both kind of dazed of like, what? Like it was a life. Like, oh man, like just thinking about it is just hard to think about, because it was like the uprooted. You like felt like you were uprooted. That your whole life you had worked towards a goal, and what if that goal isn't the right goal to go for? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
what does life look without this?
Yeah, what does life look like? And it was like a roller coaster for Kelsey, maybe. I mean, it was a roller coaster for both, but definitely a roller coaster of emotion for Kelsey. One day we would talk about these things, and she would be like, "Wow," and she would have feelings of, you know, being upset or anger, or, you know, not being understood, and then the next day it's like, oh, but how are we going to teach our children to be good people, you know?
Yeah, I was having a hard time, like, it was, I mean, you had a lot longer to think about the steps of, like, I literally feel like I got hit by a truck, you know, and all of a sudden I didn't see the world the same anymore.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to, like, know how to process that. So, yeah, I was like, I mean, you know, I would not wear my garments one day and then put them back on the next day. Like, I was seriously conflicted, because I'm like, well, what if we're wrong? Or what if this isn't true? And that sounds really wishy-washy, but I was also, I don't know, there's also something there that, like, growing up in the church as a woman, I didn't really get to fully explore my way of thinking.
No.
I kind of have always just taken the back seat on everything. And I think that's a little bit of a personality thing too. I don't think that's all the church's fault. But I was never encouraged to think for myself and to act on what I thought. I either, like, threw it out because I'm like, well, that's not going to work, so let's get rid of that. Or it was just, like, something I never got to pursue, I guess. Yeah. So,
because the goal was to be a wife, to have children, to raise those children. Motherhood is the best goal, you know, you can have ever, you know.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I mean, you still want to be a mom, obviously.
Yeah, I love being a mom. But I definitely feel like I cut myself short of life a little bit. Because I didn't even take college seriously. Because I was there to... Well, part of me was like, I don't ever want to be poor. And so I'm going to get that piece of paper in case I ever have to work.
Just in case.
But, like, I never even considered pursuing something I loved. I threw all my hobbies away, and my focus became finding a husband and starting a family.
Yeah.
Which, very inconveniently, I hit this identity crisis just during all this. Like, who am I?
I think it triggers naturally when you question your worldview. You trigger an identity.
It started a little bit before our faith.
That's fair to say.
Our truth journey.
That's fair to say.
Is I just started feeling like I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to make decisions. So part of the point of me saying this is the part of the roller coaster was, I don't know if this is my decision or if I'm taking the back seat. And I wanted to figure that out, but was trying really hard, but also I've never really got to exercise those skills
very
well. And this was definitely a terrible first test run
Yeah.
of trying to not sit in the back seat and let other people control my decisions. Not that you were, but I was letting you.
Sure.
And so I did. I was like, okay, trying to live in the moment and go with my feelings. It put me on a very up and down roller coaster. And to be honest, I think I'm still kind of on it.
Yeah. Things roller coast around here.
Which is really hard because I think when we started this truth journey, it brought us together like...
really close.
Like glue.
Yeah, we were like, well, there's nobody else. It's just us. And we were, terrified, but yet there was still just us.
And we didn't know what would happen. All of a sudden you're like, well, what's going to happen from here on out? You're just, your game plan, you basically put in the trash. So you're like trying to figure out what it looks like. There were many days, you work from home, that you would just come out and sit on the couch with me. And we let our kids watch a lot of TV at this point. And they were just like playing a lot because we were just like, whoa.
What is happening?
Yeah. So that was a very special time for us. I think we got to connect a lot.
Yeah.
But I started to feel a little bit of a separation when you were excited about life. You kind of overcame a lot of these first initial shocks. And you're like, all right, well, let's move on. Let's figure this out. Let's make our decisions. And I'm still sitting on this bus that just hit me, and I don't know how to get off of it yet.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went through a period of time where it was hard for me to see you make decisions because I was like, I'm still on this roller coaster.
Yeah. That sounds pretty valid.
Pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate of our experience.
But it started to scare me because I started to have feelings of, is this going to be a mixed faith marriage?
Yeah.
Is this going to be...
I was terrified of a mixed faith marriage. Which,
if I can't handle these things that he's going to decide for himself, like alcohol or coffee or the things that you were ready to take a step forth and try or whatever, and I was still carrying a lot of guilt in making my own decisions, which has made it harder for me to move forward and just live a happy life, And our daughter is turning 8 next year, and so the utility of it, we're going to be excluded from our families who are very active, both of them.
Yeah.
We both come from a family of 8 kids, and missionaries and all sorts of stuff. Like,
the whole lineup.
We're going to have to live on an island by ourselves for me to be okay with this because this is too hard.
Yeah. I didn't naturally see all those outside pressures to begin with. But there is. When you leave the church, it's not just you. There's a whole community around you. And if you're not moving away to a different community, then they're going to see you for a person that left the church that wasn't strong enough, that reasons that usually aren't true. They just tell themselves. And dealing with family that, is just now starting to come around to, these guys are serious. Like, they're actually going to be different.
Yeah, well, I kind of skipped this part, but so this was November, so this was like all in a month. Not all of this, but like the
this
reading
is
the CES Letter,
yeah,
and us connecting, and we had kind of started coming to terms that we might leave the church, that this might not be for us. And so November rolls around, and I just have like this weight. I just feel like I want my family to know where I'm at.
Like the biggest dirty secret.
Yeah, and I love my family, and part of me was just like, I don't know. You don't want to be alone in this. You don't want to just like, and we had each other, but he had, a few people in his life that he was able to talk about this with, and I had nobody.
Mm-hmm.
I was afraid to tell my friends. I was afraid to tell my family. But I was feeling heavy.
Yeah.
So I decided to talk to my family. I mainly wanted to talk to my parents, but some of my siblings were there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even get any words out. I just started crying. And, yeah, it did not go well. We'll just say that. And it was
hard for everybody.
It was emotionally very hard. Some things that were said to me after the fact, just made me feel like I was possessed by the devil, and I was confused because I was letting Satan confuse me, caused me more heartache and more confusion because I no longer could listen to my heart because now I had, people I love telling me that I was indeed confused. And the stuff I was reading is not true. And
like having really emotional conversations, even later after this, about like not living up to the temple covenants, that we had, taken upon ourselves. And that we know what that means, like that we know that means something big. Just hard stuff.
Which was said to me. I mean, like I said, I viewed some things in the church differently, and expressing this to some people in my life, they were telling me, I'm like, so am I going to hell because I don't want to be part of this church? And the answer was, well, you know what's going to happen. And I was like, actually, I don't. Enlighten me, because you're telling me my temple my member record, my membership in this church is contingent, it is relatable, is, what's the word I'm looking for?
Equal value is...
My membership in the church
important.
Is literally my membership into heaven. I was like, because part of the thing that was confusing me, I'm like, I was told, like in seminary, people of all religions, of all races, of everything, not all members of the church are going to be saved. And not all non-members are not going to be saved. I'm like, then what's the point of the church? And then you want to leave it, and they're going to use that. They're going to tell you that you won't make it. You'll be one of the people that don't make it. And I was like, I'm so confused right now. So it became more confusing for me. And now I knew my family thought this of me. It was hard for me to think of it differently, I guess.
Yeah.
And it caused more of a roller coaster because I wasn't able just to ride my own roller coaster.
Yeah.
I had to involve other people.
We told our families pretty early on.
Yeah. And part of me regrets that, but also part of me is so glad I don't have to relive that.
Yeah, that was
really hard, and it was really heartbreaking. And I still have a lot of young siblings, and so this has caused some where all your siblings are adults,
right,
and you guys are able to have open conversation and try to understand one another and still be okay to disagree, while my sister is 9,
Yeah.
So it's a very different dynamic, and it's hard for my family to think that it's just not open. It's not an open conversation that we get to have. That was it.
Maybe someday.
That's basically the only conversation I've ever had with my family. Well, with my parents. I've been able to talk with some of my siblings more. But it's still very taboo, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like this is commonplace when someone comes out like this. There's hope that person will return. That this is just a phase. It's okay to question, but only if you come up with the right answer. And I think that we're starting to pass into the territory of maybe where they're like, maybe this is going to be what they're going to be. I don't know.
With some people, I think.
Yeah.
But I think there's quite a few that still think this is just a phase.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wonder how long that'll go on.
Probably forever.
Forever. Well, actually, some people, even in the church, some parents will think even after their children pass away that they'll have the chance to accept Mormonism at that point. And so what happens in this life doesn't matter. And that terrifies me because I don't want to live a life of silence for my parents to not see me for who I am today. Like, that's the most important thing to me, like, for a relationship, of like just seeing that I'm there, you know, instead of just seeing who you want to see, maybe. So
I can personally say that if anything, some things have been taken away, so to say, that helped me grow spiritually and feel fulfilled. I'm feeling happier and fulfilled in other ways as well. And just feeling like when I felt like the church that was the only way kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But now it's very different.
How do you feel now? It's been
almost a year.
Almost a year.
Actually, more than a year, so.
It's been more than a year. Yeah, because we passed the general conference of this
October.
Yeah. Woo! Woo!
I think, so this is where I'm at now, is I just feel, it's crazy it's been a year, and I still feel like this.
Yeah.
I thought I would be in a better place at this point. Mm-hmm. But I still feel like I'm on a little bit of a roller coaster because I'm also having a hard time hurting family members.
Yeah.
And not having that open dialogue of where I'm at is hard because I don't think they think this is something that I'm going to stick with for a while, you know?
Well, what are things that you're like, this I'll probably stick with?
What I will stick with? Not going to church.
You like that?
Like, I miss the temple a lot.
Yeah.
The feeling in the temple, not necessarily the ceremonies, because I don't know if I've ever really clicked with the ceremonies, and now I really don't click with the ceremonies.
We had a really solid panic attack.
Yeah.
At our last temple experience, which was
about a year ago.
Yeah, about right now. Like November.
We were feeling terrible, and we're like, let's go to the temple and feel good again, because we just felt so bad. And I cried the entire time, and the sweet lady next to me just thought I was feeling the spirit so strong, and I was like, no, you don't understand. This is not feelings of the spirit. This is feelings of, like, definite confusion and heartache and what is happening in this room, and why aren't all of you freaking out? Yeah, it was really hard. We cried. And I think we sat in the celestial room for like an hour and a half afterwards. And I just had a really good feeling that things were going to be okay. And, which is really funny because later I expressed this experience with some other people. Goes to show that you have to be careful with who you share your experiences with. But
because that was like a sign that you're all good, it's going to be okay.
Well, no, because I had this moment in the temple where I felt like, I was like, you know what? I've never asked Heavenly Father if this church wasn't the one true church.
Right.
So I decided in God's house, in the celestial room, I just had this, terrible experience, but spiritual experience doing a endowment, I'm like, I'm here. I sincerely want to know if this is the one true church. And I said, is this not, or I don't know how I worded it, but I got a peaceful feeling of this is not it. And like, that was just my experience. Mm-hmm. Some people have the opposite experience, and that's fine.
Yeah.
People will have all sorts of experiences. But in that moment, I felt like, wow, this is not all it. And I'm in the celestial room having this spiritual confirmation that this isn't it.
Yeah, that's like the mecca of all responses.
I was like, what?
Except for, not the response you expect.
But, like, I've expressed this experience to some people, close people in my life, and they've told me that Satan was deceiving me. And I'm like, I was in God's house. Mm-hmm. You know? The devil doesn't go in God's house. That's what I was always told.
Oh, he can get in there.
Yeah. I was told, well, he can seep through the walls, and other people bring him in. And I was like, what?
This is getting more crazy as we go on.
I was just like, experience after experience, I had more like, you people are crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me things I've never thought or believed. And
right. And then after that, we started researching more into confirmation bias, which is, for example, why is it that everyone believes that their religion is the true religion? How is it that they get a truthful confirmation? Well, how do we know that it's the Spirit confirming it instead of, ourselves being able to produce that burning of the bosom and things like that? And so looking into that, looking into a lot of other biases was really interesting for me. Like, how is it that everyone's born into the right religion? Like, that's pretty lucky if that, like, the law of averages maybe says that shouldn't happen. So maybe you're born into something and you're in that religion, but you being born in the right religion, the truthful one.
Well, not every religion can claim that.
Well,
because that wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly, yes.
Not everyone can be the true church.
The only one.
Yeah, so I think after that experience, I did feel really peaceful about living a life that was good, but doesn't necessarily mean we have to fit in this mold.
And I think the roller coaster is more along those lines. Is when you have that roller coaster, it's like, how are we going to be good people? How are we going to, raise these children? Are they going to be picked on because if they're, living in a community that is Mormon?
Yeah. Those are definitely part of it. And also just, like you said, the utility of it. Our families are very active. And I'm like, so what? We're just not going to baptize our kids? They're going to feel excluded from all their cousins. Like, I start to think about family life and what it looks like. Not so much, and this is part of, like, something I struggle with, is not so much of me living the life that I feel like I should live, but, like, what's the best life in everyone's eyes, so to say.
Yeah. How can I win and everybody win and eat the cake?
Yeah, exactly. It obviously doesn't work. But I'm just, like, aware of how many hearts I've broken and how many hearts I will continue to break as we don't baptize our kids or bless them when they're born, or lifestyle is going to be different. I don't want my kids to feel like they don't fit in with their family. Yeah. And in families that are very active, they're not going to fit in with a lot of things. So that's part of my roller coaster. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because it's not all about me. My roller coaster doesn't go up and down as often as, like, my family roller coaster.
Meaning extended family?
Just our circle.
Our family.
Yeah.
Meaning us 5.
I start thinking about my kids and what I might be robbing from them, or what I might be...
Yeah. Guilt.
Yeah. The guilt of taking away baptism, of taking away a temple marriage, or like the extremes, obviously. But I mean, our oldest is 7.
And we've learned that there's been a lot of shame that we've dealt with in our lives growing up in the church, and we perpetuate that shame cycle if we don't break it. We just pass it right along, for our children to start feeling, shame over stuff that's natural, that they shouldn't feel shame over. And so we're hoping to break those barriers, and that they can maybe have a better experience of learning than we did.
And part of my fear is like, how are we going to make that happen? Because all we know is what we know. So we've already shamed our kids on quite a few things for natural things or whatever, but things that we're trying to direct them in, the church's way, and there's shame there.
Yeah.
And they're young. We've already done some damage. So I'm like, what does it look like? How do we grow this happy life we keep talking about? Because I just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it this close up. I have seen plenty of happy people outside the church. I have. But I'm not in their home, and I don't know how they go about things. So, taking a step back, trying not to think so much about the future has helped. And not get so overwhelmed and worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, but just focus on today. But still, that's hard, because a lot of things come up in our day-to-day life that I'm like, okay, how do I redirect my child to think differently? Because I've already conditioned her to think this way.
And I wish there was a course or something that can guide me along, and listening to a bunch of other people's stories has been helpful. But there's so many emotional, there's so many, things about should we baptize our child? She's 6 months away from being baptized. And I think we've answered that question for us, but I think we'll do some more videos on those topics and dive deep into, the pros, the cons, just the thinking around it. And I mean, if you need help psychologically, this has been traumatic for you, go and find help. We did a couple of sessions with a counselor, and it was helpful for that counselor, him not being a member, and telling us that kids are resilient. They can come back from a lot of things. So stop shaming yourself, stop shaming everybody, and just grow from here. They need you. And they need, something that they can learn from and grow up on. And you're not going to be perfect either, but, move forward with what you feel is good for the family, because, they're young. They're going to choose what they're going to choose when they're older. But that was helpful, because in the church, you kind of feel like there's this big pressure to baptize your children, because if you don't baptize them, then the sin will be upon your heads. Mm-hmm. And it's you just feel really bad if you're not giving them, these chances, and oh, what if it's true? And you play that whole what if game, then it just gets hard. What are you robbing from these children? Well, who knows? But you have to make choices. You have to live a life.
And I think it's been hard to, I literally just had a brain fart, and I don't know where I was going. Hold on. We were talking about kids and
feeling shame for robbing them of,
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that trying to figure out yourselves while trying to figure out your family unit is hard. Because we're
wait, who are we again? Oh, no, we have 3 kids.
We literally just in your analogy, we literally just burnt the house down and we're trying to rebuild it. But there's still kids involved. And so we're still trying to figure out what we believe or what we think. And
even if that's important.
Yeah, exactly. Because our whole lives, you've been told to believe this. And that's been your, in a way, that was kind of your instruction to life.
Yeah.
You had a manual. You had things figured out for you that you didn't have to figure out. And so... Simple, but some of it was damaging.
Yeah, okay. A lot of it was, maybe not simple, but comforting to not have to think.
Yeah, comforting. I mean, plus it's a plan.
Yeah, I'll take that. Follow the
plan. People like me, I like a plan.
I like a plan.
I like to know what to expect, what to look forward to.
You love plans.
I do. So when you take that away, I'm like,
okay, so
I need a plan.
What's the plan?
But we also are trying to rebuild.
Like, this is great. There is no plan. You gotta make the plan. You're like, no, I don't like it. I don't like it.
So that's like a very personality thing that we've had to work through. Is just like dealing with
and dealing with like individuality of like, I'm an individual, she's an individual, but when we came into the marriage, it was about us becoming one and doing all these things together and agreeing on all these foundational capital T truths. And now maybe that truth isn't necessarily what binds us anymore, you know? So how do we build together? How do we have another foundation? I mean, luckily we love each other, and like, that's great, you know, people that get into a marriage just for, I just need to have kids with somebody, make it with somebody, I'll make it work. Like, that's pretty scary. And you have marriages that are just falling apart, and maybe they really did love each other and stuff. This stuff is hard and heavy. But man, I was terrified of losing Kelsey because I questioned the foundation that we agreed on when we started this whole thing, 8 years ago.
Yeah. That's a valid concern.
Bryce came in here and blew everything up, and let's just blame him, take the kids and run, and the church can be our home, Thoughts like that, and me overthinking things. Just scary crap.
Yeah. Well, and I have to admit that I've had my fair share of blame during this journey. Because you're the one that had questions. I was fine.
I was fine.
You're the one that made me see the truth, which is not fair. And I've since apologized for that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing.
But that's part of my roller coaster.
Yeah. I mean, let us know if you're a couple. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of couples. But, like, did you tell her before you read it? Did you read it together? Did you say no on your own time and you're going to read it? Like, because I didn't want the separation to happen because we're just really tight knit. We really like to chill together, and, like, I would start to think differently about stuff if I just read the CES letter by myself, letter from my wife, and so I wanted to do that together. We do stuff together.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm tired. Anyways, anything you want to add? Something we missed? We could do another video later.
I mean, that's basically our spiritual journey.
And it's ongoing, to be continued. Figuring out what comes after the crisis.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, it's probably a lifelong thing. But, like, that's hard pill to swallow because before it was given to you. I mean, you had to work for it. But
yeah, you had to check the boxes.
Your plan was, and like being the Mormon girl I was, it wasn't hard to do that. I just went with the flow and I did it. And there were some things that were weird, but I didn't often dwell on those. I hung on to the things that felt good.
Yeah.
But now I view it very differently, and I have a hard time with having young kids. During my roller coaster of a ride, there were times where I'm like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go back to church because I need to know for myself, what I want and what I think. I can't even bring myself to do that because I've become so not okay with the things that young kids are told to believe.
Oh, yeah. When we were sitting there in primary, you remember that in Queen Creek? We were sitting there and they were just doing like normal primary songs. And we were appalled at some of the things that they were teaching these children. And, I mean...
songs we were singing along to. Because
Yeah.
we knew them by heart.
Yeah. We're just like, oh, man.
Oh, the worst part.
I don't agree with that.
We didn't touch on this, but I was in charge of the primary program.
Yeah.
Around Christmas time. And we're 2 months...
Faith Crisis Primary Program.
We're 2 months into this faith or this truth journey. And I was conducting it. So I stand up and I'm saying the things and I'm helping the kids say their parts. And half the things the kids are saying that I wrote down, I'm cringing at now. Because I'm like, I can't believe I literally told you just to stand up and say this. And you don't even know if you know Joseph Smith is a true prophet. But I'm telling you to say it. And I just felt terrible. And just being in the primary and loving it also made me dislike it. And I can't put my kids back in that. Even though there are some really good gold nuggets that you learn in the church.
Every once in a while, like, love one another.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
No, it's not.
I have a hard time. That literally keeps me back from going back to church, is my kids. Because I think that if I was alone, I was single, I didn't have kids, I think I could continue going to church. Well, at least for a while. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know if I would come to a breaking point, but I think I could continue to go because there was enough in the church that I liked. And I kicked out the things that I didn't like in my head.
Yeah.
So personally, I think I could have made it work, but I'm not alone anymore. I have a family, I have a husband, and I want to live a happy life. And I don't feel like for you and me, that doesn't feel good. For me to go through the motions alone, go to the temple alone. Like, I just don't
Although
want
I
that
am
life.
supportive of what you want to do.
Yeah, and you've always told me that. So.
It's just crazy how the church can be this huge unifying thing when you're all doing the things that are in the church. And then as soon as one person gets out of line, like the church as a wedge comes in and starts to create distance.
Yeah.
Like in a family. The church shouldn't create distance inside of a family, but it does.
Yeah.
When that happens, it does.
We have some really close friends that have expressed some hard...
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, you know, he became inactive, but still supported her and actually went to church with her. But just the heartache that it brought with it.
Yeah.
And I think that we saw that early on, and for us, we just didn't want that.
Yeah, I was scared of that. I was like, oh, no.
And you still say that, but you still would let me. You would still support me.
Right.
But like...
And I think it's less of an issue now, as long as we both agree on, like, the higher level things for, like, the family. Of, like, mindset. Instead of the celestial kingdom being the end goal and we're doing everything to get the celestial kingdom, instead of that, it's set around how do we live this moment, you know, to the fullest? And how do we have an experience? And how do we teach the kids and learn together from those experiences rather than debating about all this truth things and what's going to happen after this life? Because a lot of things we don't know. And that's okay. And if we don't know it, we can still make decisions based upon not knowing something. And I feel like that's given me more peace recently than mourning all of those losses of those big truths for celestial kingdom, you know. And still, you know, trying to figure out, you know, some of those big ones, you know.
Yeah. And I think just in my head, it doesn't make sense for me to continue to go to church alone if I don't agree with half the things that are being said. So, and that's what keeps me where I'm at and being okay with where I'm at, is I don't feel like I need... If I went back to church, it would be purely to please my family, my extended family.
Yeah. Which those things we do miss.
Yeah.
Like when they're having church at their home because of COVID stuff, we miss that family interaction, that you're at the church together.
Yeah.
And that you're singing in the choir together, and that you're sharing a lesson together, talking about, the kingdom, in ways. And just missing that, And we were still at a baptism recently for one of the cousins getting baptized. And we were supportive and we were there and it was a good experience. But yeah, just participating at a different level, not being able to be in the circle when the Holy Ghost is being, conferred.
Confirmed.
Being confirmed a member and conferring the gift of the Holy Ghost. Is it conferring?
I don't
know. Let us know.
It's getting late.
Getting late conferring. Anyways, just those things of hard to make a decision away from those events that brought you closer together, and still wanting that closeness, but yet, you've chosen to leave the church. So how are you going to be close to us? Everything about us is the church.
Yeah.
Everything about me growing up in high school is about not kissing girls and not dating steady because I need to go on a mission, And then when you come from the mission, you know what's up because your mission president tells you to go find a girl to get married and to
But you're very
replenish.
Inexperienced dating.
You don't even know who you are. The only thing you know about yourself is maybe what you did on your mission, which was take orders. I mean, I'm speaking, not necessarily take orders, but like, it's not really a self-discovery because that happens when you're in the world. I feel like on the mission, you're protected from what the world is. You're kind of taught that the world's more of a scary place and to kind of stay away from a lot of things. My experience.
God will protect you.
Yeah. Just keep checking the boxes of what you need to do, and that's the happy life, the box checking.
And I think part of things that, like, to go off of what you're saying, is also that weekly spiritual upliftment.
Yeah, you're all together then. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, you have to, like, figure out how to recreate the things you like about the church, and that's really hard. Because all you know is how to get it from a religion viewpoint. But that doesn't always have to happen that way.
It was painful not going to church after we had that crisis. It was like, we're not at church today. I mean, we chose not to go, but like, it's sad. And so we'd go out into nature to try and, get some recharge from the trees and, the streams and stuff, which was helpful. But at the same point, it's like, you feel that you messed up, that you're choosing out of something that, I don't know, maybe it's betrayal, but there's just so many emotions. It's just like, there's a lot of for quite a while.
Yeah.
But a lot of the is gone. And now it only appears sometimes.
Yeah.
At least once a week. Mostly more times than once a week.
Anyway, we're just trying to figure out life.
So, help us figure out life.
And I was going to say kudos to all you couples out there who
made it through this and are making it.
Who made it through this, who are in mixed faith marriages and make it work. And I just I have a lot more respect for people and what they go through because
totally.
We're just all trying to figure it out.
Yep.
So
we would love to connect with people out there, couples, young couples that have made it through this. I mean, obviously, we are a young couple that is making it through this. I mean, we're just kind of figuring it out as we go. But we've decided, hey, we want to stay together regardless of if this is true or not. Which I think we're kind of in agreement that a lot of things are more damaging than they are useful. But
for us.
Yeah, for us. And we're okay with everyone making their decision. Our family members, we respect where they're at.
We support them.
And we support them. Yeah.
We go to missions. We go to We go to baptisms, not
We
missions.
go to missions.
We go to baptisms. We go to homecomings and farewells.
Yeah,
and
picking missionaries up from the airports. Stuff like
if
that.
we get invited to church at home to a sacrament meeting, we usually go.
Yeah, we have gone before.
When we're invited.
Yeah, sometimes that's weird.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks you guys for watching. This is like several part series likely. But let us know what you guys are feeling and thinking, and we can talk more in depth about a lot of those things, because we kind of zipped up a year and threw it at you. Well, actually, several years if you go before that, but the year of really hard stuff, and I think that's the conversation that needs to be open, because we went through this, and we're here for those of you that are going through the same thing. We know how hard it is. We know the heartache, the pain, the anger. There's so many emotions that go into this.
The sadness.
Yeah, the sadness, and even happiness. We've had some really happy moments.
Yeah, we have.
But it's important to have this conversation be open, and it's really therapeutic for me to do stuff like this. I mean, this is your first time. What do you think? Therapeutic-wise.
It felt good to talk about it.
Yeah. Felt good to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, hopefully, you like us talking about it, and we would love to talk with you guys who want to talk about it. Lots of talking about it. I think that's what's missing, because instead it's like really sad if you can't talk to anybody about it. Anybody to understand what you're going through. So, we get you. Hard. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And how to find people that are willing to talk about it, you know. Anyways, I think that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. We'll see you in the next one, fellas, boys and girls, and young peoples that are crisising. Bye.